All right. So, so Chris, good morning. Thank you very much for participating in this exercise where basically the SVC needs to re-examine an old plan,
Sure.
particularly in light of the change in the universe that has occurred with COVID. And I'm benchmarking ECS and you in particular as an organization that I think has not only been successful, but most likely has prospered over the last few years. So I'd like to ask you a series of questions and just have you react to them.
Sure.
So the first question is when COVID came along, and when you started a little bit before COVID came along, when you started at ECS, what market conditions did you find ECS in, and what did you do to adjust or make some pivots in terms of how you did things?
So pre-COVID, coming in, I guess this is late 2019, I really started. Where I was most concerned with ECS was I knew we had world-class content, but that wasn't translating into margin yielding revenue for the society. We were spending too much to bring it to market. We had a lousy platform, and I just thought it was a huge disservice to our community of authors that were publishing this great stuff, and we're putting it out on a really subpar platform.
And when you say platform, you mean it's
our digital library,
publications.
Yeah, I mean, from submission, we didn't have a great submission site. The trafficking was pretty confusing for editors and authors. And then ultimately, once the content got posted to our digital library, it was on. I mean, it really looked like a DOS-based. Right, I'm going way back. Right, it looked like DOS. It had almost no color. There was very little interactivity. There were none of the features that you would expect to see in in a 2020s website in terms of sharing capabilities and the feedback loops you can get with other authors and readers of your content. It just wasn't. The content was great. Everything around it stunk. And so that was the main thing, was just do a total overhaul of the staff that worked on our publications, the platforms and the systems we used, and the partner that we had, and the way we sold our subscriptions. We were selling subscriptions. We had one person who wasn't really experienced, and she's a great salesperson. She did a really good job of maintaining a book of subscriptions, but wasn't a staff. It had no, ability to scale out its pool of people that it contacted to. And so I moved all of our back-end processing to the Institute of Physics. And I gave IOP our subscription sales as well. The things that we kept in-house, the only things that we kept in-house, and what I think is the most important thing to keep in-house, was the relationship that we as a society had with our authors and our editors. That we would never farm out. So we're always the point of contact with the authors. They don't really deal with IOP at all. They deal with us. And that to me is important because that maintains the relationships. And that's really what we are. We're a community. And whatever we do, it's an outgrowth of that community. So that was critical.
So this is interesting. So in your view, your principal product seems to be knowledge and publications.
I'd take it back. I'd say it's the knowledge and the information of the community that may manifest in publications, that may translate to conference attendance. Either one for us, but it's that knowledge in the community is the most important thing for us. Yeah.
And I find it interesting that you identify the need to scale your marketing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, we scaled sales. We need to scale the marketing as well.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah. Sales.
And that is something. I just got the email from one of the staff that has marketing on his job description, and it worked well, but he's really involved. He's our director of community engagement. And so we put marketing with him, but now we've grown so much in the last couple of years that we need a dedicated marketing resource that will work with him to do that. But the sales part absolutely got offloaded because they have IOP as a staff of outstanding subscription salespeople that have the contacts and the community around IOP, because IOP is a great publisher. And the result has just been, it's what enabled us to do well in the pandemic, because between 2015 and 2018, the net on our publications, and we're thriving publications business, but the net was about $500,000 for that entire period. In 2020, our net was $800,000, and in 2021, our net was 1.1 million. So the transition, I mean, we started with IOP, and it took me all of 2019 to figure out who the partner was going to be, sign the contract, get it implemented. We were ready to roll January 1st, 2020. And so, I mean, we went from making, in a good year, maybe we do $250,000 in net, to making 800 the first year and 1.1 the second year. And just like that.
With fewer staff.
Not only fewer staff, but we offloaded, well, that's not really the right word. We reorganized and eliminated the highest paid people in the group. So we had a chief content officer who simply wasn't adding any value to the equation. Was the highest paid staffer other than myself in the organization. And I think that was, the previous executive director was a wonderful CEO and really brought ECS. Rocky Calvo. Yeah. Tremendous guy. But I think, he'd been in there so long at that point. He'd been for 27 years. It takes a lot to remove a C-level person and replace that, position, and divvy out its role among other people, and really, for the most part, assume the C-level stuff myself. And I just saw we didn't need that. But then we had a chief publishing officer, a director of publications, and an assistant director of publications. And I thought, well, between me and the director, we can cover the work of the four of the, what my predecessor was doing and the other people in the group were doing it from a leadership perspective. So we eliminated those two positions. Then we had another person leave, and we were able to, in that group, we didn't replace her because the deal with IOP made that position redundant anyway. And so we really, effectively, we cut about $400,000 out of our costs and significantly increased our revenue. And that's how we got to, completely transforming our pubs business. But it was a lot, and it worked out great. But I came in 2019, guns a-blazing, and in the first month, I let go of a C-suite person. And I didn't ask the board's permission to do it. And I just figured, look, I'm coming in, I got to make my mark. This is like clear as day to me. This has to happen.
Well, I mean, I think you are, and most executive directors are kind of hired to make things happen. And, in some cases, you put your rep on the line, and it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Right. And it was, look, I wanted this to be, I really wanted to make my mark and have this be a career defining job for me. So I knew I had to do something bold right out of the gate. And I mean, it didn't take a rocket scientist to look at the organizational chart and see the changes you needed to make. So we did it. And it was funny. I told the president, I said, look, I just want you to know this is going to happen today. I'm not asking anybody. This is my decision to make. The volunteers don't have any say over the staff. This is all mine. You can judge me on this decision, but I'm not telling anybody else except you that I'm doing this because A, that would be completely unfair to the person who's being let go.
Absolutely.
And everybody was really outraged. Like, we wanted to know, we should have known you were doing this ahead of time. And my response to them was, why? A, you can't know because it's none of your business. It'd be breaking confidentiality. And B, you don't want this on your head. You carry, like, they liked this person. I'm like, so now you want to know that she's going to be let go before she does, and now you're a part of it. So leave it to me. You hired me to manage the business. Let me manage the business. And it was a tense start. But I think they realized that it had to happen eventually, and they can't argue with the results. So that worked out exceedingly well. I was really fortunate, that it worked out as well as it did. But again,
one of our former presidents that's done quite a bit of mentoring and board development famously says that the board's single job is to hire and fire the executive director.
That's pretty much it.
And it's interesting what you're describing, that typically in these professional societies and the volunteer boards, the board is very helpful and they want to do something. And your job is to kind of marshal their energy level into stuff where it's very, very strategic for them, as opposed to tactical or operational.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Because I would say all the time, everybody's a mechanical engineer, because you can see how something works and you go, oh yeah, move that over there, do this. But in reality, the longer term thinking is the hardest thing to do. And, I'm pretty pleased right now in that we've got a group that, I guess has enough faith in their new executive director to say, listen, we can remove ourselves from the operational aspects of it. Now we've got to start thinking about, what do we want to be when we grow up? Are we doing things correctly? What can we do to adjust them, et cetera, et cetera. So, most people will not know how much we have interacted together since you came on board at ECS. But I see a lot of parallels. So let me ask you a question. So COVID comes along, and it obviously upset your model.
Yeah.
And I know some things, but I'm going to ask you to kind of go through there. What did you do to adjust to COVID? And did you make any adjustments that now have become memorialized into standard operating practice going forward, COVID or not?
I think it remains to be seen. So let's start with the staff. So immediately, I was 2 years ago yesterday, was the day we went remote. Everybody had 1 day a week, but we own an office building where it's big enough that everybody in the company has an office in this building. So the entire company was housed, one or two remote people, but the entire company basically was housed in this building in Pennington. And so we went to, complete remote operations right away. I don't know if that's going to stick. I got to be honest, I don't see a lot of downside to us being remote, and I see a tremendous amount of upside to us being remote in terms of the staff. And in a bunch of ways, it manifests positively for the staff in terms of they're happier now that, inflation and gas prices are going through the roof. Everybody not commuting every day is just, it's like giving everybody a raise at no cost to anyone. So that's tremendous. The biggest change, though, I think for us as an organization was somewhere between 40 and 45% of our revenue came from in-person meetings. So to have that, when we shut down in March, it was about 6 weeks before our May meeting. And so we just had to cancel that one. And then, like everybody else, we had to figure out how to pivot to doing a digital meeting. And what is the advantage of doing that digital meeting? I don't ever want to do a digital meeting again. I don't like them. I was really glad we were able to do it and convene the community we convened however we could. But I don't see digital meetings staying a part of it. I don't even want to see hybrid meetings stay a part of it. We're going to have a hybrid component for our May meeting just because we have to at this point. But eventually, I want to try to phase that out because it's just cost prohibitive to do a truly hybrid meeting where you can attend every session.
They're so expensive, and you have so many sessions. Holy cow!
Our Prime meeting was our first digital one. So that's the, I don't know if you know about Prime. It's the one we do in conjunction with the electrochemical societies in the Pacific Rim. So we all meet in Hawaii. Korea is there. The Korean Electrochemical Society, the Electrochemical Society of Japan is a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a 5,000 person meeting, which is almost double the size of what we normally do. And so to have that one be our first digital and to lose all of, and that's the other killer for us, is like the Prime meeting is one of the few sort of cash cows for the society. We operate on pretty thin margins. That one we tend to make a nice cut on. And so it really funds a lot of crucial initiatives. It only happens once every 4 years. So to lose that really was a big hit. But fortunately, we did really well in the digital meeting space. We took an approach, as we've discussed, about only charging presenters. And it was sort of analogous to the open access model of our publishing, in that, you know, we see the value not as, or we don't want to drive revenue by charging people well, let me say this. The value proposition that I see for us is the community that we can offer authors and conference presenters. And so the more people we can get to our meetings, the more value it is. And so attendance revenue isn't key for us. It's the value that we give to the presenters. And so we try to attract as large an audience as we can. So we didn't charge just attendees or people who are just attending the digital conference. We only charged the presenters. And the value that we gave back to them was that, look, if you pay this, it was a nominal fee. It was half of our regular conference rate, and you have no travel costs. So this is much more efficient financially for a presenter to do this digitally. And by making it open access, you know, we had 10,000 people coming to our conferences instead of 3,000 people coming to our conferences. And financially, we didn't take a hit because in ECS and for a lot of technical societies, you have about a 1-to-1 author to attendee ratio. So everybody coming to your conference is presenting.
And so that describes the SVC on our conference side exactly.
Sure. And so if we were to say, all right, we're going to charge everybody who comes to this event, we would have had all of the people who were authoring, you know, come to the event, and we would have had nobody else there. But by making it free, we still had that same exact number of paid attendees. We just also had 2x times the number of attendees because we offered all the free stuff. So if a professor was making a paper or making a presentation, she could invite her entire class to sign up and see that presentation. And if we had charged attendees, there's not a single student would have seen it.
So I'm going to make you laugh.
Right.
But today, and I see this analogy exactly with the SVC, where I think we're a little bit different than ECS because so much of our revenue is driven by the exhibition.
Right.
And the exhibition does not translate well into a virtual space.
Yeah.
Okay. But, you know, when I look at the exhibition, what do our exhibitors want? Our exhibitors want people who walk through the halls. And our traditional model has been that we have the conference in conjunction with the exhibition, and we don't counter program as I think, you know, we've discussed,
Sure.
To drive people in. However, we also have this one-to-one, more or less, relationship with one listener to one presenter. And what we need to do is break that one-to-one relationship.
Yeah.
And so today, we just announced 50% discount for a conference for the listeners. Okay, sort of following your model a little bit in that.
For physical attendance?
Yeah, for physical attendance.
Ah, nice.
I want to see if that's going to drive in some folks, because what we want to do, what I think we need to do, is identify how do we get more people to our event. And we have to look at things holistically and not
Yeah.
just look at a silo of revenue, which is conference attendance, but what do we need to do to make our principal stakeholders happy? So we're doing the analogy of what you've done and recognize that if you're a presenter, there is value in presenting, right? You're going to have the memorialization of your presentation. You're going to have the publications. If you're an attendee, you don't have that value proposition, so you may not be willing to pay the extra fee that is required to satisfy the overhead.
Right.
So,
I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense to do it that way. And I think it properly aligns the cost that you bear, because presenters are a lot more expensive to you than just general attendees are. And you give more value to the presenters because you're significantly lowering the entrance barrier to be a part of your conference. So the only scary thing about that is that I don't know that again, my own board still was not happy with this charge the presenter model for conferences. They still don't seem to get it, even though we had real success. And so last year, all of our digital meetings were actually able to generate a net return to the society, which is incredible. And I mean, not just on the conference, but like the fully loaded costs of the staff, electricity, rent, all the things that go into having an employee. We charge all that back to each group. And so even with all those fully loaded costs included, we were able to make money on the digital meetings. So I think the model really can work. I think you guys are pushing it forward in a much more aggressive way, but I hope it works, because I would love to see that become a model, because I think you really could solve that attendee to presenter ratio thing.
Well, I'll share with you some other things we're trying. Sure. Because, ECS is a scholarly society. Mm-hmm. The SVC is not. So even though we have a small peer-reviewed track, which is basically an Elsevier journal, but in general, our organization is not the organization that's got high impact journal that people are going to want to get their information in first.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. And we've been evolving that we need to be a little bit more sophisticated in our approach to why do people come to the SBC. And when we look at what people like, it's networking, it's the ability to be educated, it's this idea that you might have an industrial problem, and there might be a group of people that might be able to suggest the solution. Mm-hmm. So this year, we're putting in 4 big workshops where each workshop is focused on a rather significant industrial problem, where the idea is people would come, we'd have maybe a couple little speakers, and then it's just open forum, roundtable discussion, people raising issues, people suggesting alternatives, allowing people to interact to the extent of, or in replacement of, a piece of just these very standard presentations where it's only 1-to-1. Okay, so that's kind of a big experiment we're doing this year.
So we've had a little, but similar. We've had a lot of success, and it's very small. But data science has become, in anything you're doing at this point, being able to manage the data and understand the data, the huge data sets we generate as opposed to in the past. Data, we all need to be data scientists on some level. And so we've done the course where it is tackling data science for electrochemistry. And it's looking at the big challenges with that and doing it in that style where you have a couple of presentations and then you got everyone's trying to define solutions to the big challenges. And so it works really well. And I have found that students are early career all the way up to, emeritus professors are engaged in this discussion, and it really makes some of the most interesting dialogue that takes place in a conference. So I think it's a really interesting way to do it, and I think you'll probably have a lot of success.
What are you doing, or what's your perspective on membership versus people who are presenting versus corporate sponsors? Do you have some kind of view in terms of these various groups of stakeholders?
Definitely do. And I got a little hot water in my job interview with ECS for my stance on that. But I mean, you have to take a practical look at it. So our membership's $130, right? For that $130, and our member numbers have been declining. Now, everybody took a hit during COVID, so it's a little hard to judge right now. But our membership numbers haven't been great, and we've been trying to grow them. And this is before my time, by just throwing more and more financial advantage at membership. So for your $130, you get 75% off every open access article you publish. That's a $1,000 discount. If you publish 10 times, that's a $10,000 discount you're getting for $130. It's insane. And to me, that's crazy. It's not, but everybody's so tied to the number of members. We have 8,000 members, and that's a great thing. And to me, those are some of our most, important people who engage with us. And from those members, we get the volunteer workforce and leadership that really drives everything the organization does. We're totally volunteer-led, volunteer-driven. And so the members are that workforce. However, the 8,000 members, a lot of them are completely apathetic. We had an election. I checked it this morning, 400 people out of the 6,000 eligible to vote voted. Most of them are very silent. A lot of people just become members because they want the discount to the conference, or they want discount to this. And if your only reason for joining is a discount, I don't really want you as a member. I'd rather charge you full rate. And the reason I say that is because when I look at our members, all right, that's great. We got 8,000, they're really important. We have 30,000 active reviewers. That's everybody in the electrochemistry space doing actual work for us that not only advances, it's the most critical advancement of the science, it's also where a tremendous amount of our revenue comes from. And the vast majority of people who are doing those reviews are not editors or not members. They're just reviewing because they care about the science. And I don't want to make membership a barrier to engagement. And I think where this really sort of hit the road for us is when I started, we had a director of membership, and he was solely focused on growing the number of members. To me, that's not so important. I mean, it is if we want to get into advocacy and we want to be a government lobbying organization, and we need to have a critical mass of members to have a voice at a governmental level. But when I see we got 8,000 members each paying $130, all right, that's great. But I got 30,000 reviewers generating the content that makes us millions of dollars in revenue every year. Who's more important to the organization, both from a scientific and a financial perspective? It's not really a question of
I think you're putting the finger on something, in that you need to identify, what was this, George Orwell, all pigs are equal, but some pigs are more equal than others.
Yeah,
now,
right.
Our organizations need to drive and identify who are the intellectual drivers and who are the financial drivers of the organization, and not to get confused with interesting metrics that don't really translate into success or growth.
Yeah, no, I think so. For me, membership is really about workforce development of the volunteer corps. It's about leadership development from the volunteer corps. But in terms of, I never want membership to be a barrier to engagement. All right, if you're going to get an award, if you're going to be a fellow, membership can certainly be a part of that aspect. And I think it's important. But again, I go back to, most of our authors are non-members. Most of our reviewers are non-members. Most of our conference, half of our conference attendees are non-members. And there's a huge, it was funny, when I started ECS, we looked at the membership and it was always about 8,000 people. And so everybody thought, wow, this is a really stable core group of members. No, the number
what did
was,
you get, like 40% turnover every year, 30%?
yeah, right. So every year we're just replacing a huge swath of people who would come for one meeting, become a member to get the $400 discount, and then we never saw them again. So it's like this revolving door. So I think what's really important is that you have a core group of members that are the foundation of your volunteer workforce and leadership development. And then what's more important beyond that is not the number of dues paying members, but the community reach. And so what I'm trying to do now is to harmonize those two concepts and not make membership about paying dues, but you can make membership about service. So these 30,000 members or 30,000 reviewers we've got, I'm happy to give them the membership discount to come to a conference if they've done a review. Each review is worth hundreds of dollars to the organization. I mean, if we had to pay them to do that, what would it cost to, you're a scientist, you're doing a review for free. We're pretty grateful for that because your hourly consulting rate is going to, and if we had to pay that, would make our publications simply impossible to maintain. So all that goes into it. So what I'd like to see is a service path to membership, or membership as a recognition of serving the science and the community.
That's a very interesting concept.
Rather than, hey, we're going to get some dues out of you. And younger members are not interested in paying dues. They're not. The new crop of students coming out, or companies do not support dues the way they used to. I mean, when I worked at IEEE, one of the things I learned was the reason IEEE is based in New Jersey is because it was run out of Bell Labs, basically. You had all the society presidents of the IEEE were Bell Labs researchers, and their secretarial staff were the admin staff of the IEEE, basically. Unofficial, but it was something that AT&T and other large corporations would support. Corporations don't do that now. They're certainly not going to pay your dues, and they're certainly not going to let your assistant, if you're lucky enough to have one, work on stuff for the society that's not really related to the company's bottom line directly. Sure, indirectly, it's related to the science and technology that drives the business, but there's no direct relationship. And so that's why staff has grown in all of these societies, because companies will not provide the administrative support that they used to. So for all those reasons, for me, it's not about member numbers, it's more about community and trying to tie back ways to make people be able to be a member without paying dues and recognizing them for the service that they've done.
So where do you want to go next?
In terms
other than the Bermuda with me, so we could have a drink with an
yeah.
umbrella on the beach.
In terms of
what do you see different with ECS 5 years from now than where you are right now?
I'd like to see in 5 years. So we have this whole free the science thing. I think you're familiar with it, where we're trying to completely endow our publications operations. I'd like to see us continue to make the progress that we've made in the last 3 years towards realizing that goal. That's going to, we've been able to put away a couple $1 million a year towards that effort since I started, which has been tremendous. We have a long way to go. I would love to see us be successful enough to fully endow the publications operations. That's going to take about $30 million. We have about 17 of that 30 raised right now. I would love to see that continue. I don't know if it's going to be 5 years or 10, but I would hope 10 from the time I started. So by the end of the decade, I would love to see us be able to be in a position to really offer free open access to authors in most cases. I think that would be a tremendous service to the community. That's one thing I'd love to see. I would love to see ECS's meetings grow beyond where they are right now. I think we run some great technical meetings. We don't have a big exhibit. We're really about science. Like you alluded to before, at our prime meeting, which is our biggest, there's a couple of blocks where we have 47 concurrent sessions going on several times a day. I'd love to see the number of people coming to those sessions grow I would really like to see a solid 300 to 3,500 people at our events. Right now, we're about between 22 and 25. I'd like to grow that. And
well, you know, I have the solution to that.
You do. You have a solution to that, I know. And then the other thing I would love to see, which we don't have right now, that I'm just starting on, is to really have a third revenue stream. Right now, it's all publications and meetings. And that we were very fortunate in COVID that our publications revenue skyrocketed, or our publications net skyrocketed, just as our meetings revenue dried up. We did great, but that's not enough resiliency for me. I think we need more revenue streams. And for me, it's one of the ways we can get it is through educational offerings and certification programs. And so we're looking at ways to really grow our education. But if we're going to be successful in education, for me, it has to be tied to some sort of certification that means something to industry. And so I guess where I really like to see us go is we're really steeped in academia. I mean, if you're a professor working or a researcher working in the electrochemical space, you're involved with ECS in some way or another. But if you're a practitioner, you're working in industry, maybe not. And I would love to see us offer more to industry and grow that side of it. And I think that's where the education and the credentialing that's where you guys are.
And we've done very, very well there. The reality is you've got to be careful about what you're certifying people for.
Sure.
Because your insurance costs in this litigious world that we live in can be stupefyingly expensive.
Yeah, I would bet.
So, it's interesting that we've been trying to connect with community colleges that have a charter for workforce development to see if we can basically tie in some level of certifications or certificates that carry some gravitas in the world, as opposed to here's a little certificate because you sat in a course for 8 hours. So one of the interesting things we're doing, we're almost finished with it, is we're revamping our asynchronous education to actually put in feedback for demonstration of proficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
and the community college piece is really interesting to me. I hope we continue to discuss that part, because that to me, being a parent of one kid in college right now and 2 more about to go in the next couple of years, as a CEO, I know how much challenge we're facing putting our kids through college. And so for people who aren't CEOs, I don't know how you approach this. And community college is an incredibly important and powerful tool into educating the graduating high school students and putting them in pretty quickly into really good jobs with some technical training that you can get from organizations like ours, where you're qualified to go do some really important work. And doesn't have to be the end of your education, but I think it's a hugely important step along the way. And I would really hope that it could be used as a means for people who are not coming from traditional college going populations to get their foot in the door and to say, hey, I could be a fucking scientist here, right? And they've never been exposed to that. And if we can do that, then holy crap, you're really transforming things and opening up doors to people that simply weren't there before. And I think that potential.
So my advice to you is, I'm 64, you're 52. The people that need to drive this activity for our organizations need to be 30 and 20 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, because they've got the view of what works in this current environment. And we're just finishing up the first one, and we're going to do 2 because we've got a contract to deliver these to industrial partner of ours, where the lead person is some unbelievable, talented young instructor that we've identified in Slovakia that is running with streaming video and embedded quizzes that honestly I wouldn't have the ability to even conceive of. And we've got somebody, you talk about service, for literally on a volunteer basis putting this together, which will be a platform for us that we can then scale across the 50 some courses that the SVC has.
I mean, I'm trying to do exactly that. So, you know, whatever we can do to help share the knowledge and the workload.
Of course.
Because we're 100% trying to do the same thing in our space. And, you know, you could even look at ways we could partner to offer, you know, I don't know how it works in your technical space, but for us, there's no way to go become an electrochemist by degree. You don't get a degree. There are no degrees in electrochemistry.
Same thing in thin films. Forget it. There's nothing.
You got chemists, you got physicists, you got engineers. Everybody sort of like needs to come together and learn what they need to learn. And that's what's really interesting is we may have people who already have their PhD taking the intro to electrochemistry course because they don't know that aspect of the science.
Right. They came from a material science background or mechanical engineering or physics.
Right. And for us too, there's other things like one of the ones that we're working on is, a course for firefighters to deal with lithium-ion battery fires. That's a new challenge for them. And if we had a nice online resource where you could say, hey, Shrewsbury Fire Department, somebody's Tesla blows up in their driveway. This is how you deal with it. There are 10 Teslas on my street. One of them's going to go up at some point, right? And people are going to need to deal with this. And so I think there's all kinds of new educational opportunities and reaching out well beyond our existing constituent base. Because right now, everybody I talk to all day long is a PhD. Everybody I talk to all day long, except for me and my staff, we're the only non-PhDs in the entire ECS community.
Well, we've shifted the bulk of our new course development away from the. I say if you have such a specialized course that the world can only support 6 people who are experts there, then you have to wait for one of them to die or move on till you can then train the next one to move in. And that shouldn't be the basis for your kind of professional education program. So Scott Walton, who is our director of education, has been refocusing us at the kind of technician and entry-level engineering level, where people need kind of a working knowledge of a subject that doesn't necessarily have to be at the cutting edge research. And the most popular course in the SVC is called Thin Film Process Troubleshooting, where it's basically 6 hours of here's all the ways you can get into trouble. And then it's 2 hours, let's ask the expert. And it's always our most oversubscribed course. So the practical courses are the ones where there's a lot of turnover and the potential recipients of that education. And it's a little bit different approach than just the kind of, let's take the seminal textbook in the subject and just review that.
It's funny you mentioned that because for us, the course that always sells out first is Fundamentals of Electrochemistry. It's the basic stuff like that. And like I said, the people who show up at that it's a real diverse group of, got undergrad all the way to established professors. So I'm really excited about the educational stuff. I wish I had a little more bandwidth to do it. because it's something I have to fit into my job, and it's hard to make it a priority, but it's clearly where the revenue growth is going to come or it's the best path to a new revenue stream for us.
Well, Chris, let me thank you for your time. You have been invaluable.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Well, hold on. I mean, you know, when COVID came and we were all struggling, the bi-weekly sessions with you, me, and Yvonne at the AVS, I think were incredibly supportive as well as innovative, as we were all struggling a bit in our space as to how to survive and how to prosper as best we could. And you know, you willing to speak candidly to basically the SVC as we embark on a refinement and a refreshment of our strategic plan is something I can't thank you enough.
Oh, Frank, I first of all, I'm happy to do it and help in any way I can. You've been hugely helpful for me as coming in as a new CEO. We met pretty much right out of the gate, and it's been a wonderful relationship for me, and I'm happy to help any way I can. You've given me a lot of guidance and advice that has been incredibly valuable. So happy to